welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Jaime Jasso. It's actually how you pronounce it. I'm a visual effects artist, art director, working for the film industry and video game industry.
That's
Um,
awesome.
More than 20 years experience. I'm actually like originally from Mexico,
Cool.
but been living in the U.S. for 15 years now.
Nice. Where in Mexico are you from, if you don't mind me asking?
Guadalajara. Guadalajara is like the
I know
second
Guadalajara.
largest city, so people know more about Guadalajara. Is where
Yeah,
tequila is from. So
that's
that's
interesting.
that's actually
That's interesting.
the land of tequila. So yeah, that's a
That's
good
pretty cool.
reference though.
That is a good reference, man. That's interesting. Yeah, my brother-in-law is from Mexico, and so I used to
All
spend
right.
because I grew up down in San Diego, and we would go down into Baja all the time, and not to Tijuana. We get down south, and some of the most beautiful country I have ever been in is down in like Central Baja. We would go down, and there was this little place called Bahia de Los Angeles, and it
Mm-hmm.
was where the I went on with my classmates on a biology trip,
Mm-hmm.
and it was beautiful because if you go to the western coast of Baja, the gray whales all go in this one bay and have all their calves. But if you go onto the eastern coast of Baja, inside the bay there, it's where the finback whales will all go and have their calves. And so we were out there for 2 weeks and just it was beautiful, man. It was absolutely beautiful and
Nice.
such awesome people. It's just stunning, man. It was awesome. Now, how did you get into your industry? How did you get into your career?
Well, I guess like any other people, like or most of the people that I've known, it started when I was a child.
Yeah,
Like when I was a kid, just I don't know, passionate about cartoons and
yeah,
movies, and I want to keep drawing all the time until I made it my profession. I mean, it sounds easy, and that's really how my passion started. It's like okay, I remember my dad took me to the theater to watch Star Wars. Like I'm talking about the first ones. Like
nice.
it was probably 79 or 80
Yeah,
back then. Like back then, even though Mexico is just like next to the U.S., we would get the movies probably 1 year after the release in the U.S.
really.
Or even later.
Oh
So I
man.
think the first Star Wars in Mexico was, even though like it's originally from the 77 in Mexico,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
got
yeah.
it until 79 or 80.
Oh
But
wow.
I was like 6 7 years old, and I remember like watching that movie, and I was like, what was that? It's like,
Right.
who did this? It's like I was like, even my dad, it's like my dad was like, what was that? Like, we were just amazed, probably in shock. And I remember all I wanted to do is like go back home and just draw. Like
That's
I,
awesome.
I I was in love with the design pretty much. Like I know Star Wars is a um, pretty cool IP in general. It's like the
Yeah,
idea, the storyline, but what caught me was the design, like
yeah,
the colors, the spaceships, the
yeah,
cinematography,
yeah,
and that's when I didn't know. Obviously, I was super young. I was like, I just want to keep drawing with this forever.
yeah.
It's like I
Well, I mean,
developed that.
and Star Wars is super cool. Like you look at those, especially the early Star Wars. Like George Lucas, his whole thing was like to make a western in space, but wasn't a western. Like one of the things that Lucas was like, and Star Wars is so amazing about too, is because like and the new stuff they're doing, John Favreau and Dave Filoni are tapping into this. That like with the Mandalorian, like the westerns. A lot of the early westerns in the U.S. were influenced by the Japanese samurai movies. So you get
Exactly.
like Seven Samurai, and then in the U.S. they had Magnificent Seven, and so
Hmm.
like with the early Star Wars, like the design was essentially let's mix space, a western, and samurai into
Yeah.
one thing, and that was kind of the design. And it's like, I mean, your stormtroopers are essentially, the helmets are shaped just like the old samurai helmets, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and you have these Jedi, which are like your Ronin warriors. It's awesome, man. It's awesome.
It's a great reference from many cultures,
Yeah.
and it touched a lot of people. I mean, from nowadays, like if you ask people from my generation, that's the movie that started everything for
Yeah.
the creative industry. You know.
That you nailed it on the head. Like, I've had a bunch of people on the show that are um, our generation. I'm from right around the same time period because I was I grew up with Star Wars too, and like people, everyone, like, what was the first movie that really inspired you? And they're like, man, Star Wars. That was it. You know?
Yeah, but that started everything. But what defines my style now,
Oh,
I
tell
would
me about this.
say,
I want to hear this.
uh, yeah, I was in love with the Star Wars, but then obviously more movies were coming in from
Yeah.
all places, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
when I watched Blade Runner, and when
Ah.
I watched Alien and Aliens,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
those became my favorite movies,
Right.
visually speaking, you know, because actually,
Blade
like
Runner, man.
if you think about it, Blade Runner and Aliens could live in the same universe
Yeah.
somehow. It's like they are kind of the same style, which is pretty much what well what the new generation. If you pronounce the word cyberpunk, everybody
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
reference that game. That
Yep.
that
Yep. Yep.
that game for me is not real cyberpunk at all. It's like
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
caricature of cyberpunk. But Blade Runner, the first one, man, like the cinematography, I was like, what is that again? You know, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
god, just when you thought you've seen everything, then they show you this new universe, and then aliens come with these new creatures were totally different to aliens. You know, like all the
Yeah.
aliens from the other movies. So it's like, wow. So that's when everything became clearer for me. It's like I wanna do that now. It's like I wanna do that dark science fiction style.
That's awesome. It's like you hit, like, and that's one of the things too, is it because one of the things that people that are uh, getting into film don't always realize is that there are so many people involved. First of all, a ton of people involved, and like for some of these really amazing creative projects, you're building a world, like a whole world, and like when it's done well, you get to imagine just this alternate world that this crazy stuff exists, and one of the things that is so important is the tone, because you're
Mm-hmm.
right. Blade Runner and Alien
Aliens.
had aliens have a similar tone. That underlying tone is just there. It's dark, it's moody, but it's also got this real intense suspense to it. That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. So
Yeah.
you're watching these. Oh, continue.
No, but I was pretty much gonna say that back then we didn't have obviously internet or anything like the media. Like one of I would say the lack of information or resources back then is what actually helped my creativity. It's
Oh,
like I didn't have like if you go now. I want reference for Star Wars on online. You will find
so much.
millions
Yeah.
of
So much.
images. I would say, yeah, it's infinite, you know.
Yeah.
And back then, at least in Mexico, it was either okay, you just watch the movies at the theater. Outside,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing. There will be probably a few magazines with some images, but that was all. So
Yeah.
what actually created is that every time I watched those movies, I would try to force my memory. It's like I will try to read all the visual language and be able to reproduce it by memory later.
That's
So I
amazing.
guess I guess that the lack of imagery is what forced my visual memory
That's
and
awesome.
to read visual language like faster. So I would say that was a great thing in my career in the early times, because I think that like when you see new artists now, because they have this overload of imagery everywhere.
Yeah.
Not many original artists are there because they are
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, he's using this asset from that you can find here.
Yeah.
So I guess people are getting somehow lazy in the sense of, hey, let's explore that, but
Yeah.
with your own language.
You know that's really interesting with music too. Like my wife is it works in music, and one of the things that when we get people building, when people create songs, everyone's using like these beats, like, and people will pull from, and it's perfectly, it's how they do it now. But like if you went back to like the 50s or the 60s, and you want a beat, it's you bring a drummer in and he's tapping something out for you. It's like if you want a certain thing, and we have all these loops and things, and you're right, it's interesting because it when you don't have anything, and this is something I was talking to. Why is English and German, why are English, German, and Danish different languages? Why? Because they were they kind of came out in isolation. We didn't have mass media. Why is French and Spanish and Portuguese, why are they different? Well, originally you go back far enough and they were all Latin. You know what I mean? But when people don't have stuff, things begin to evolve and change. And like let's imagine, you go back, to the composers of Bach or someone, or even painters, in the Renaissance. Did Michelangelo see a ton of Leonardo da Vinci's work? Or were these people, actually, I don't know if that time frame works, but were these people seeing their contemporaries' work? They might not have been. You would study and then you would do your own thing. And if you were lucky, you could see some of these other people's work. But now we have access to information and you can get exposed to it. And it's a blessing, but it's also kind of a curse at times too, because it's so easy to emulate or copy other people.
Yeah, I think that analogy of music actually applies to any other creative
Yeah.
profession. Even if you think about food, it's like the
Right.
chefs, or what we know about fusion. I
Yeah.
don't. I mean, don't mind me. I love fusion cuisine, and
Yep.
but it's ideas taken from many others and then smashed into one plate, which is great, right? That works. But when you don't have the resources and you are forced to come up with a solution from
Yeah.
within your own ideas is where
Yeah.
where actually things the magic happens. Like one of the things that I do even now, let's say when I want to create a new environment for a movie or a video game, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I reference a lot in the real world because just like
Yeah.
you said, like Seven Samurai, that's the Star Wars and the westerns. But then I try to not look at anything. It's like, okay, I have the base, which I'm gonna build this castle in space. I have the base of how castles work, but now I don't want to see any reference, and I just want to see what's out there. What's in my mind,
Yeah.
and I will try to interpret that idea or that visual stimulation, and that's when things are like, wow, I was never thinking about this. But when you go to a reference all the time, you will pretty much be copying somebody else's solution to a creative problem.
And I love what you just said. You're copying someone else's solution to a creative problem. And so often, the best solutions are when you are forced out of your comfort zone. There was this really cool, I can't remember whether it was on. It was either like Nerdist or Geek Tyrant, one of these pages I follow that they post all this really cool like sci-fi stuff, right? And it was a graphic artist who he went up and he grabbed things from his kitchen. Like he like a can opener, and he was like, can opener now turned into a spaceship. And so he grabbed a bunch of weird things in his
Excellent.
kitchen,
Yeah, yeah.
and like all of them were turned into spaceships. And I was like, this is so cool, because it was like he was like, let's get out of a box, find inspiration wherever you can find it. And
Yeah, that's the idea. As a consumer, let's say you're not a creative, but as a consumer of media, when you see something different, that's what brings attention to you. It's like,
Right.
oh, I've never seen that. It's like
Yep.
aliens from
Yep.
Alien. It's like, I've never seen an alien like that. Like totally different. It's like, all right. So that's when it changes everything. Like at least in the mainstream. Like, okay, well. experiment. I think it's part of being creative. Of course, I failed a lot of times.
Yeah.
Sometimes my designs were like, oh, this looks really bad. But sometimes, but sometimes it was like, oh wow, this looks really cool, and I'm more into it because I'm excited that I haven't seen this shape before or this
Yeah.
design. So it's part of the creative process.
I think, and it's powerful to kind of like challenge yourself like that. And that's beautiful, man. Now, so you started seeing these films when you were young. Now, where did you go? Did you go do formal art training? Did you just start teaching yourself to draw? How did you embark upon this path?
Yeah, well, back then in Mexico, even in the US in the 70s, there was not such a thing as visual effects school or
No.
animation. It was, and I remember there was one making of TV show in the 80s when they were talking about like how they made Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, yeah,
And I remember they mentioned, oh, like the artists working for this film are architects, um, artists like traditional painters
yeah.
and industrial designers. And I was
Mm.
like, okay, that stayed in my mind for a while until
Mm.
I was in college. No, before college, sorry, high school. I was like, I want to study something related to this. And I found out that in my university in Guadalajara, they had industrial design
Nice.
degree. I was like, okay, that's gonna bring me closer to what these guys are doing. But obviously, industrial design was totally aimed to furniture.
Yeah.
Like to build your own
Yeah.
furniture and chairs. And I was there, and I was super frustrated. It's like I wanna create spaceships, or when
Yeah,
are we
right.
gonna do that? But one of the things that happened when the first day that I started college, we had this questionnaire like, what are you, what's your, what are you aiming for with this career? It's like all those kind of questions. And I remember I answered, I wanna work at the Industrial Light and Magic. I wanna work for a Star Wars film.
Hmm.
But it was like a statement that sounded in even for me, it sounded like a dream. This was
Yeah.
like I just want to do that, and that was my honest answer to a question. It's like okay, and I
Yeah.
remember the teacher grab it. It's like haha, yeah, right. Keep dreaming, boy. And that's how it started. Like I was pretty much working for a dream, not knowing that through the years I was building something. Like
Yeah. Yep.
I drop out school, I drop out college because I was like this is not gonna take me anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't want to really end up building chairs or
Right.
tables, which is great. I mean, if that's what you want to do,
If
right?
that's your
I have
calling, yeah.
yeah, I have great friends from industrial design that now work for Audi or Ferrari, which is great. That was their dream.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't mine. So what I did is like, okay, I need to come up with a strategy that's gonna take me there. With no
Hmm.
resources, I didn't have money. I was paying my own college. So I dropped out college. I went to the library. Internet was starting. I remember it was not
Yeah.
commercial in Mexico in the early 90s. So I bought, I think, two books of 3D, like 3D modeling.
Hmm.
One was called Learn 3ds Max in 14 days, something like that, crazy. But there was nobody that could tell you this is not the way to do it. There were no
Yeah. Right.
tutorials. YouTube didn't existed, so it was hard, man.
Yeah,
It
but
was really
that's
hard.
that's the crazy thing. Like, I remember when I was coming up, I was wanting some. Let's take something really simple. I wanted to learn guitar, right? And I had to go, and there was the guy at my church who played for church, and he taught me like three chords, and and I knew those three chords for forever. And then,
Mm.
and it was like, and then you'd go and buy a book, but it was challenging to find, the information. Now, these apps, like, and the YouTube tutorials, man, it's like ridiculous.
I know.
Like the access people have, like, become an amazing guitarist in 30 weeks, and people do it because there's a real structured system that tells you exactly how to do it. You just follow the steps, and boom, you're there, which is awesome. But it's like for people that were coming up in the past, you had to fight to get that information, and it was really a journey to get.
I know, and you see it now, like in the entertainment industry. I'm seeing some amazing artists, and they are like 17 years old, 18 years old. I was like,
Right,
wow, because they grew up pretty much with all this technology already.
right,
I mean, they grew up in the 2000s already, right?
right,
With
right.
with YouTube, so for them, it's totally normal to have access to all this information, like just with one click, just
Yeah,
even on their phones. And I think that's creating like monster artists right now,
yeah,
because the people that are really dedicated in that early young
yeah.
age, I mean, like they are becoming Michelangelos in their teens. You know, it's like, oh my
It's
God,
so
the
true,
level
man.
of knowledge
Yeah.
they can acquire now is unbelievable.
Well, this is an interesting point. Like my daughter is 5, right? And we use because I live overseas, and to make sure that she can speak multiple languages, I get content off the internet, so that
Hmm.
she can learn this language and this language. And one of the things is she has this knowledge base that I like for a 5, that when I didn't know some of these things until like I was in my teens. She's like, oh, this is a tsunami. A tsunami is this, and she's just cranking off all this knowledge, and I was like, that's amazing. It's amazing that people have access to all this so
I'm
early,
jealous. Yeah, I'm jealous
right?
of all these new eras.
Well, and it's interesting because there are some artists online that are just amazing right now, and they're getting recognition for it. Like there was the face for the Mandalorian. They had a face where they put Mark Hamill's face onto another actor's body. It wasn't a deep fake, but it was something. There was this guy has this YouTube channel that his whole thing is doing deep fakes,
Yeah.
and he's really good at it. Like he's
Hmm.
amazing, and he's like, well, this is how my version would have looked, and they were like,
It
people
was
called him
better.
up,
Yeah.
yeah, the people called him like, hey, you want a job? And he got a job from it, like, and I think that's beautiful because he wasn't doing it it was his passion. Like that's
Hmm.
what he really enjoyed, and it was special like that to see these people that are just they're going into it. I met this kid that I'm planning on interviewing him, and he's like, I think he's in his teens, like 15, 16. But the stuff that he's putting up, like his like CGI stuff is amazing. And like,
Yeah.
and he's been getting shared all over Instagram for like the quality of like his tutorials. He's a kid.
Uh, I know, and it's not only that they have access to all this. I think that their brains are already wired differently,
I
and they
really
learn like that, like fast. And
it's
for me, man,
fat.
like learning already, like shit, yeah, like
Right.
takes me a while, like I don't have the same, even though I'm trying to retain all this information, and for new generations, because I'm a teacher as well.
Yeah.
So for new generations, I see they just they just eat all this information
Yeah.
in hours, and it's like, oh my God, like I'm really looking forward to see what the newer generations are going to create, because if you think about it, the world is really changing when
Right?
internet started, like 25 years ago, when it was already kind of commercial everywhere and
Yeah.
available. It's not even 30 years. It's like from the mid 90s, something like that. And look where we are now, and look where the kids are now, like with all this information. So we're gonna get not only to Mars, man, we're gonna get to Saturn
It's
in
crazy.
this century for sure.
I agree, man, and it's like we have. I'm so 100% with you because it's like the leaps that we're taking. It's nuts, man. Like, I remember the first like Mac. Like we had one of those little tiny Macs with a monitor like this, and
Yeah.
like like and it was great, but man, it didn't do anything. Like it was, but yet that computer had like thousands of times the computing power of the
Hmm.
computers that took us to the moon.
Hmm.
The computing power that they had to go to the like my cell phone is
Yeah,
so much more advanced than the computers that took us to the moon. Like, can you
I know,
imagine
I know.
what's gonna be? There was this video my wife sent me the other day, and it was this guy who was painting in a 3D 3 dimensional space, and and I reached out to him. I'm gonna get him on the show. He's a 3D painter he did Van Gogh's Starry Night in 3D virtual augmented reality painting.
Okay,
And
I
he
think
did
I've
it,
seen it.
and it was beautiful, beautiful video, really cool video, and like, and my wife sent that to me, and I was like, yeah, that's how the universe was made, because I'm like, that's how it is, man. We're in a simulation. Let's be real. I'm a big believer in
The
simulation theories.
Matrix.
Dude, it is, man. I'm looking forward to number 4 coming out. What was it, next month, next week? Is it next week that number 4
Well,
comes out?
yeah, there's a screening actually next Monday, so I'm probably gonna attend that. But there is already a demo of Unreal Engine Matrix, Unreal Engine, the Matrix.
Yeah.
It's probably the best ever graphics for video games out there. It's only for PlayStation 5, but
Yeah.
whoever have a PlayStation 5 and can download that, it's unbelievable what they've achieved with a real time graphics.
And the distance that we've come in video games is nuts. Like, I mean, think about it. Like, Tetris was awesome. Super Mario was awesome, but I mean, I remember playing on the original, like, Game Boy, man. You have a little screen like this. It was not backlit, so I had the special attachment that would go on and shine a light on it, so if you could play at
Oh my
night,
god, yeah.
you had a little light shining on there. And I mean, but yet it was super fun. But like now, you know, you're literally immersed in this world. And I know that some of the people are looking at like some of the videos of the metaverse going, I don't see that going. That stuff, I'm looking at that, man. Like the types of art, I'm loving watching these games because we are so clipping towards Ready Player One, man. Like, we are
It
so
is.
close.
It is.
We are gonna be there sooner than people realize, man.
I think it's going to be an important thing to be. Um, what I'm trying to say is like we have to pay attention to the metaverse because there are things with these graphic levels that we have, and that's actually one of the things that made me move from the film industry to the video game industry.
I'd love
So
to hear that.
I worked at Lucasfilm for 10 years. You know, I finally
So,
achieved
hey,
my goal.
yeah, I was gonna say, which is awesome that professor told you you'd never pull it off, and you're like, I would have been there, like, I would have taken a picture of myself, emailed it to the university, and been like, what's up?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, after the years, I mean, uh, it sounds easy, but it was not. I mean, it was
No
a
way.
struggle for decades, of course. And
Yeah.
the first studio that hired me in the U.S. was Blur Studio,
Yeah.
which it's actually one of the best studios for CG. And his owner, Tim Miller, he's now a movie director, the director of Deadpool,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
latest Terminator, which I don't like at all. But well, that opened actually the doors for me in the at the U.S. to start looking for a better position. So that's how I got to ILM, where I stayed almost 10 years. It was my dream job, man. Like, I love working there. I work on 3 Star Wars movies and like 20 other movies. But then something happened when I was there. Like, even before The Mandalorian was out, we were already playing with real-time graphics for the Disney Star Wars rights, for
Yeah.
the Millennium Falcon rights. So that was my first approach to real-time graphics. And then people were already developing like these tools that allow them to have real time graphics really close to photorealistic images. So what happened is that video game companies were looking for people working on the film industry because it's like, hey, we know we have the knowledge for real graphics, but we want the eye of a cinematographer
Yeah.
of people from working in movies. So they start like just hiring like from every other studio. Like I'm not kidding, probably 50 of my friends working at Lucasfilm, we all left to different video game companies because
Mm.
they have the money, man. Like video
Yeah.
games are making, I think, twice or more
Mm-hmm.
as much money and the whole Hollywood industry.
Yeah.
So they are really putting their money on great artists.
Well, and I think that like people, if I'm certain that because I've been hearing that some of the studios, like the streaming studios, are starting to invest money into gaming slash film kind like crossover stuff. Like there's looking at that because if people don't realize that the future is interactive game film, that's where it's at, man. It's gonna be like this interactive type stuff because I know like if you look at my daughter, she was playing the Minecraft movie, and it's an interactive movie. And she was like, she's 5. She's like, I get to pick what happens. This is insane, you know, because it wasn't the game, it was the movie, and so she
Hmm.
was like really enjoying it. And I was like, and like, albeit some of the like, I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but the Miles Morales game was brilliant, man. Like it's so good, and there's as much there's as much narrative structure in the storytelling in these video games now as there is
Hmm.
in any film. And so there's this great story arc, and the video game companies are hiring great writers to kind of create these story arcs as well. So I mean, there's money being invested in the right places. So I think,
Yeah, yeah. And what I was trying to say is that
yeah,
uh, a few years ago, I mean, like probably a decade ago, there was like a clear line between this is film and this
mm-hmm,
is a video game, and now that line is totally
it's blurred.
erased.
Yeah,
It's blurred. It's like both industries actually coexist and they
yeah,
need each other. That's why
yeah,
the Mandalorian has all these real time um, um, technology from Unreal, and
yeah.
that's why video games now, like this Matrix demo that I told you, is like when you see that video game, it looks like a movie already because it has all the color correction, all
That's
the
awesome.
depth of field. It's like wow, there is no such a difference now between both industries.
Yeah, and I think that's only going to make it more interesting for us. And you were talking about how, and I think that I'm super excited because I saw this one. What was it? The virtual reality headsets they've been around for a while, but like the devices that you can kind of strap in and start running, I'm like, that's so cool, man. Like, if I had have had that when I was a kid, man, that would have been awesome. And so it's like by the time like I'm gonna be able to have access to it, I gotta stay fit so I can use those games too.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's really awesome, and so it's really interesting. But again, it's also because of the computing power. These devices that we have are so much more powerful than anything I was gaming on, previously.
Oh,
So
of course, and I think what's happening with the Oculus right now,
it's so
like
cool.
those devices, they are really cool. They're getting there, obviously. Like 10 years ago, it was like all these cables,
Yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah,
graphics were not that cool. And I think what they are doing with the Oculus and the metaverse is that okay, the Oculus is just like the beta
yep,
hardware right now because
yep,
they obviously to make the metaverse successful, it needs to reach as much people in the world. So I
yeah,
think the new devices are gonna be way cheaper
yeah,
because that's just the tool to access the metaverse, which is gonna
yeah,
be the real business. Like there is already real estate and the metaverse like selling for millions of dollars. Like
yeah.
how's that? I don't
Well,
understand, man.
but I mean, it's hard for us to process because we're not there
It
yet.
is.
But yet, it's like if I had to go back in time and explain to anyone in the 70s or 80s, okay, so 2020, if you want to learn something, you go on the internet. And we have this place called YouTube, and it's got all these videos. What do you mean, man? Like Star Trek?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's like, no, yeah, and and I once looked at this photo. It was a photo of like all of the devices, 1980, all the devices that you would need to carry to equal your smartphone. And it was like,
I
it was
saw
just,
that.
it was
It
like a
was
table.
amazing.
It's amazing.
It
And
was
you're like,
amazing.
wow, because someone from the 80s, and someone before this couldn't conceptualize it. And it's like we have a hard time wrapping our mind around what the metaverse is going to be like, but so like it's going to be just integrated. And then looking at things like Neuralink, you start bringing like how they have brain interfaces into that, man, we're not going to have a headset. It's just going to be like,
That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy to think, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna happen.
it's going to be like, yeah, and you're going to be having a conversation, and meanwhile we're also interacting with on the metaverse, man, and it's like mind blown. But I mean, it's interesting because you look at things like the Matrix and you wonder, like, man, we really are clipping towards that. Hopefully in a good way. Hopefully,
Yeah, hopefully in a good way.
in a good
Don't
way.
let the machines win.
Yeah, right.
That's all.
I'm tending to think though. I think that the hypothesis that we'll merge with machines in some way, shape, or form is more likely. I think we're going to be just like part of the part of.
Cyborgs.
I think people will. I think it will be some type of cyborg type thing. God knows, I wish that I could have like enhanced robotic stuff. I mean, that'd be awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Well, that's cool, man. Now let's talk about like where do you go for your inspiration now? Like, say you're going to be creating something new. Where do you go for inspiration day to day?
I'm still, because I started as a traditional artist, like real painting, real drawing. I always tend to go for outside my monitor. That means I'm just gonna be drawing or doodling, but I think my main inspiration would be photography. I love photography.
Me too.
I'm a
man.
photographer as well. And unfortunately now with COVID, I'm not traveling, but I used to travel twice a year.
That's awesome.
Europe and Asia. It would be like both, it's like always picking a different destination or picking my
awesome.
favorite destinations. I love the history in Europe. And I love that in small territories, everything's so different. And you can just go like to one country, totally different in 1 hour. And,
Yeah.
and all the old world really fascinates me. Asia, of course, like the technology, like I've been to Japan, to Korea, to China. It's like, oh my God, this is skyscraper. It's like Blade Runner already.
Dude,
Like-
I remember the first time I went to Japan, and we pulled into we were in Roppongi, and my friend was like, yeah, we're gonna park your car. And we drove into a building, and she's like, and I was like, hang on, where are we going? And she's like, no, you get out of the car here. And so I got out of the car, and suddenly we're like, there's a bunch of people behind us. Where are the cars going? And we step back out, and all of a sudden the doors close, and the car's this robotic thing takes the car away, and I was like, what? That's rad, And it's like it totally is like cyberpunk type future, man. It's awesome.
It is. I mean, like some countries are already like really, really ahead of its time. Like when you see
Yeah.
the skylines now, and the projects coming. So
Yeah,
like,
man.
wait, what? Like those huge skyscrapers in Dubai are not gonna be like the tallest anymore. It's like that's
Right.
crazy, and that's
Yeah.
gonna happen hopefully in our lifetime. So yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that, what was it? Well, there's that principle of the speed that technology doubles. There's a special name for that. Like that technology doubles, like the level of technology. I can't remember. There's a concept. I'll have to send it to you afterwards. But there's this concept of that as we've been advancing in technology, it used to be that to get double the level of computing power, and I think it was computing power, it took a long period of time. But the level of computing power is actually growing exponentially. It's not like this
Yeah.
linear thing. Like the computing power is going literally like it's an exponential growth.
Exponentially, yeah.
And
We
so,
don't even know what's gonna happen in 10 years or
right?
5 years. Yeah.
Right? I mean, like I remember one of the first remember I moved up to LA in 2007 and I got this on a big movie in 2008 and like I remember that movie was that summer was the summer of the iPhone. Everyone was like, yeah, and everyone was just like, look, I can touch the screen, and the apps were so like, I've got a guitar. Look, I can touch the strings.
I remember, and the lightsaber. Remember?
And the
There was
lightsaber,
like an
yeah,
apple,
yeah,
and it was
yeah.
like, what?
What?
It was like
What?
magic.
Yeah, right. And
It was
I
like
can
magic.
touch it. Yeah. And that's what 15, 13 years or 12, no, it's like well, that's longer than that, was it? How long ago was that? 12 years ago? Yeah, about 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah, I was at Blur Studio. Actually, one of the supervisors got one of those, the first iPhone, that we were all like gathering, just like magic. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa,
Whoa.
whoa.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it was like 13 or 13
They're
years
13,
ago.
14 years ago. Yeah, it's like around there.
And when you see that device already, it looks old as like
It's
looks really
so
old.
It's like an antique now. I saw my wife had her first iPhone, the iPhone 1, and she had it tucked away. And I pulled it out. We were cleaning, and I found it. She saves all her old phones. She's got this container with every phone she's ever had. And I was like, this is awesome right here. And we pulled out the iPhone, and it's like thick as hell. It's heavy as anything. And we turned it on, and it still operated, and it was just so slow compared to like the stuff we have now. And I mean, and that's just
Yeah.
12 years, man. And like, I can't even imagine where we'll be in, think about it this way too. 1900, people were riding horses. In the year 2000, in 100 years, we had flight. We have, just the level of technology in 100 years. Can you imagine where we're going to...
Space, yeah.
Yeah, space. Where will we be in the year 2100? Like, that's insane.
Exponentially talking, like I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I think the same is happening because it's not only the world that surrounds us with machines. It's the human mind that's exponentially growing with it. And it's like, where are we going with all this? And also, we haven't even tried. It's only experimental. The quantum computers. Once they are available,
right?
Once they are available for public, man, I don't know. That's kind of scary. Something's gonna happen. Time travel or something. It's like, holy cow.
Yeah. No, I'm already thinking. I'm serious. Like I believe that this is. I'm totally one of those people that this is not base reality. I think we're in the Matrix, but like, are we gonna like explode the Matrix if we go? Is it gonna be like Inception, where we go a deeper level in? You know what I mean? Like, where the people are creating another universe inside our universe. Like, wow, that's awesome. So
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and just talking about again, like back to your questions. I love science as a reference.
that's awesome.
For the things I do. It's like I think it's a great source of inspiration as well. And I actually, like 2 years ago, I had the chance to give to talk about how science fiction influences science and vice versa.
That's awesome.
In SpaceX.
That's real cool.
Yeah, it was like it was a great experience to hear how some of the real scientists there were inspired just to develop their skills by watching Star Trek or Star Wars.
Yep.
Or vice versa. It's like, yeah, I know Star Trek influenced a lot of the real, like the iPads and the real communications. So it's a great source of inspiration. If you want to do science fiction, just read the science.
Yeah.
Astronomy and things like that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and I think that's so powerful because, everyone can. We all go to different places to find inspiration, but I never thought about that. Like, and I had read an article. Like, there was an article that I read. Like, all of the things that Star Trek, like, predicted would be real, and like they were like they acted like it was just this prediction, and then suddenly these things happen. No, man. those scientists were watching that show. You know what I mean? People were inspired by it. It wasn't just predicted. It was like people saw it and said, "Yeah, man, that's something we should have. That's great." And sometimes it goes in great directions. Sometimes it goes in terrifying directions. But but they made it.
I know.
I was watching this one video the other day of a I love drones. And I love the idea that now it used to be everyone would think a flying car was going to look more like an airplane, but now these personal flight devices look like giant drones. You know what I mean? And there was this new one that flew really well. I think it's one of the better flying ones so far. And the thing was just like, and I was just the guys clipping along, and I was just like, that's awesome. And terrifying because they still hadn't enclosed the propellers because they were wide open. The guys in the cockpit, I was like, oh, that's scary.
Yeah, but what about that jetpack? That is no longer a jetpack. It's a guy with engines on their wrist.
Yeah,
that looks really futuristic. That looks like, oh wow, that's like real Iron Man somehow, you know.
Did you see the one with I think it was the French military has the commando fly from one boat to the next boat as part of a demonstration?
I think somebody already bought that technology because it's like, wow, that's really cool, you know.
Yeah.
But just like you said, I think technology's been for good and bad ways, you know. There are bad people in this world too, so hopefully nobody will get that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but it's just interesting because, but it's interesting too because I remember once we were talking. My old roommate was a Navy SEAL, and this was way back in the early 2000s, and he was talking about at that time it was top secret, but he's like, oh yeah, we totally have facial recognition software. He was he's like, when we go in onto a trip, and he's like, yeah, we just start scanning people's faces, and pretty much immediately we get back whether that's someone important. Now we know that's facial recognition tech. It's pretty common, but they had that, a while back. That was 20 years ago. These guys were using that stuff on these missions. And my point being, it starts out with only certain groups have it, but then the technology becomes widespread. And at that point in time, I think we can see the real potential of it. There was this really cool tech that I was reading about from Japan. And so what it was an algorithm created by a bakery, right? So what did the algorithm... So the bakery was trying to automate their checkout because they kept going through workers too fast. And they wanted the workers to be able to focus on other jobs, making sure the shop looked nice and thinking, and people interactions, because Japan's all about the politeness and and so they wanted to make it so that the checkout was this seamless thing. And it would make it faster because when you ever go to the grocery store and you see this, go to Trader Joe's and you get vegetables, right? And the guy's and they're they know the code for each vegetable. These guys they remember them. It's pretty amazing. Aubergine, blah, 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 done, Well, what this bakery in Japan was finding that each time they got a new person in, they had 300 different types of pastries. And the people couldn't remember them. And so they would have to pull out a book, find the code, enter the code. It took too long. So they created an algorithm that would scan the pastries, immediately highlight what all the pastries were, and then boom, inputs it into the computer and identifies the different shapes and types of pastries. And they had a software company design this for them. Well, they kind of shared the technology with other people because they thought it was really interesting. And the researchers were then using the tech to identify cancer cells because the tech was so sophisticated at identifying incorrect shapes that they would put it onto a scanning microscope and it's boom, cancer. And it's
wow, that sounds like a big research for a bakery.
Right. I was like, what type of bakery is this, man? Yeah. But yeah, they pulled it off. Yeah, but again, Japan, and technology is just what happens when technology is used for good. It's amazing power. Great power, great responsibility.
Yeah, and I think it's the same now for artists. It's like not only the resources, but the tools that you have as an artist. Like I don't know, like life is easier as an artist. Like remember in the '80s, like getting a video recorded was expensive. Like getting
right?
a camera was expensive. So
Yeah.
now our phones are 8K video, 60 frames per second. It's like, wow, that's amazing camera. Some of the manual cameras are kind of cheap. Like these Wacom tablets are just great tools that make your work way easier. So you are just focused on art, which is a great thing. So, yeah.
It's awesome, man. Now, if you could go back in time and give some advice to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
I think it has nothing to do with technology or things, but with my own reaction to things. I think fear stopped me in a lot of things. Like self-doubt. It's not that it's over. It's like I think the imposter syndrome is very common. It's very common among artists. But now I know, and now I kind of attack it in a different way. But back then, when I was younger, imposter syndrome was really, really stopping me to take a lot of decisions or take more risks. If I could go back in time, I would say to myself, just go for it. You are gonna fail, probably.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that risk, if you don't take that risk, I don't know. You're never gonna find out. So I'm actually here because I took some risk. I failed, but I also won.
Yeah.
But I could have, like, if I think about my past, I could have been in a way better position if I would have taken more risk. Right now, I think that's one of the things that a lot of the new generation artists are lacking of. It's like, just be brave. It's like they're always trying to be in their comfort zone. That's very common in all a new generation. So just take the risk. You're not going to lose anything. Actually, you're going to win a lot.
Man, I love that. Well, brother, this has been a fun deep dive into all types of fun things, man. We should definitely do this again sometime.
Of course. I'm up
That's
for
awesome.
it.
That's awesome, man.